Welcome to Mapping Minerals Diplomacy, an explainer series that brings clarity to the deals, players, and policies shaping the global race for critical minerals. I'm your host, Gracelin Baskaran, Director of the Critical Minerals Security Program at CSIS. In this episode, we turn our focus to the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country with some of the richest mineral reserves on the planet. Earlier this year, the DRC captured global attention when President Félix Tshisekedi offered the United States access to key mineral resources in exchange for security assistance amid escalating conflict with Rwandan-backed M23 rebels. Just 4 months later, following high-stakes negotiations in Washington and Doha, the DRC and Rwanda signed a peace agreement on June 27th here in Washington. The United States and DRC are now moving forward towards a regional economic framework and a formalized minerals cooperation agreement. The bilateral U.S.-DRC relationship is consequential to U.S. mineral security interests. Let's look at the data to see why. The DRC is one of the most resource-rich countries in the world. When you look at the DRC's copper ore grade, it is 4 times the global average and 11 times the highest operating mine here in the United States. When we look at the cobalt production in the Congo, 74% of the world's cobalt comes out of the DRC. This means that for key commodities like copper and cobalt, the DRC not only holds the biggest reserves, but also the highest quality minerals. It's no surprise then that the DRC consistently attracts the highest amount of exploration in Africa and one of the highest in the world. As the data shows, in 2024, the DRC attracted $130.7 million in exploration investment, outpacing established jurisdictions like Indonesia and Kazakhstan. This is despite the fact that just 20% of the DRC is mapped today. Given the DRC's landmass is 3/4 the size of Western Europe, this indicates that the country has considerable untapped potential. Now, the Chinese have long outpaced the United States and its allies with doing business in the DRC. Chinese firms have equity in 15 of the country's 19 copper and cobalt projects. This has given Chinese firms significant pricing power. Increased production from Chinese companies has actually forced the closure of Western operations. For example, in 2024, China Molybdenum Company Limited, also known as CMOC, nearly doubled its 2023 cobalt output, reaching an all-time high of cobalt production, even though prices had collapsed over 60%. In response, on February 22nd this year, the DRC announced a minimum 4-month export ban on cobalt, not to force local processing, but to explicitly curb the global oversupply and bolster prices. This move disproportionately affected Chinese firms, particularly CMOC, which reported 48,600 metric tons of cobalt inventory in the first quarter of 2025 alone. This exceeded Glencore's entire 2024 cobalt production. The export restriction sparked a rift between Switzerland-based Glencore and China-based CMOC. In May 2025, reports surfaced that CMOC was advocating for a rapid end to the embargo, while Glencore maintained that Congolese cobalt exports should not resume until the market stabilizes. This divergence underscores the broader tensions between Chinese and Western stakeholders in the DRC. On June 21st, 2025, the DRC government extended the export ban through September 2025. It's important to note that the cobalt export ban has had a marked impact on market prices. Between January 1st this year and March 2025, just weeks after the cobalt ban took effect, cobalt prices surged by 48%. The cobalt ban extended has continued to buoy high prices. The fatigue towards the Chinese model is tangible, and the U.S.-DRC engagement is going to set the tone for U.S.-Africa minerals diplomacy going forward. Though the DRC is ripe with opportunity, it's also a challenging environment to do business, and a whole-of-government approach will be needed to address some of these barriers. Let's take a look at some of them. First, successfully developing the mining industry will require substantial amounts of infrastructure investment. The absence of energy infrastructure is a significant barrier to the development of greenfield mining projects in the DRC. Mining is one of the most energy-intensive industries in the world, accounting for approximately 38% of global industrial energy consumption and 15% of global electricity usage. The DRC has one of the lowest rates of energy access. Just over 20% of its population are projected to have access to energy by 2030. Globally, it has the third largest population without access to electricity. Additionally, there's a significant disparity in energy access within the country. 41% of urban residents have access to modern energy, compared to just 1% of the rural population. A second key limitation is transportation, which will be a critical effort going forward. Efforts like the Libido Corridor will be essential to reducing the cost of doing business in the region. The flagship U.S. engagement with the DRC has been the Libido Corridor, a railway and transportation network that creates the fastest route for the export of critical minerals from the African copper belt to the United States and Europe. Third, there's a need to increase security for both people and commercial assets. At the regional level, the International Monetary Fund has identified a high risk of intensifying conflict. The peace agreement is the first step towards de-risking this. Fourth, there's a need for fiscal, legal, and regulatory certainty. To attract and sustain investment, Congolese authorities must advance meaningful reforms that foster a stable, transparent, and predictable operating environment, ensuring fiscal policies that align with the long-term horizons of mining projects, legal certainty to uphold contractual agreements, and regulatory clarity through timely and transparent permitting process. In the 2020 Doing Business rankings, the DRC ranked 183 out of 190 countries by the World Bank, indicating considerable room for improvement. And finally, there's a need to pursue a more responsible model of mining. It will be important to overcome the historical legacy of mining, wherein communities and workers bore many of the consequences of resource extraction, including environmental damage, human displacement, and poor economic growth. The new model will need to address these challenges by developing a streamlined set of standards that define responsible mining. This will help firms secure and maintain a license to operate with host governments and communities. It will also be a potent point of competition with Chinese firms that have thus far dominated the mining industry. Ultimately, the DRC is a pilot to determine how the United States can effectively turn diplomatic commitment to mineral investment in Africa and beyond. Given the country's complex risk profile, the central question becomes, what conditions must be established to make long-term private investment in the DRC viable and attractive? And with that, I'm delighted to welcome Guy Robert Lukama, chairman of the board of Gécamines, the DRC state-owned mining company, to discuss this and more. Guy Robert, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Gracelin, for the invitation.
Guy Robert, to get started, what do we need to do to change the historical legacy of the mining sector in the DRC, which has globally been viewed as one that has human rights issues, child labor? How do we rebrand that?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss about the DRC mining sector. Today, we can consider this amount of storytelling. Yes, we have a lot of human rights abuse in the country, but I not necessarily agree with you that you can have a correlation with the mining sector. When you see the area where you have mining sector developed, and when you have a lot of concern about the peace and the war, we don't necessarily have a strong correlation. That's the first point. Secondly, we know that we have to improve our governance of the mining sector. The mining sector requires to have stability of the legal framework, as you said, a tax regime, but also to have the skills available to develop, and as you said, power and logistic available to develop the potential. Our aim also beyond the energy and the logistic is also to have a new approach of the transformation, and this is where the United States could be part of the journey.
Guy Robert, do you see that there's the political will to make these changes? Because less than 20 years ago, companies like BHP, Anglo American, Rio Tinto were operating, but some of them left because some of these challenged. Is there the political will to make these changes?
Yes. Yes, definitely. We have a new approach of the mining sector in DRC, and the way they convey the message to third parties, to the countries, is our stakeholders is totally different. We explain to the people that the potential we have could be developed with the support of the rest of the world. Not only one jurisdiction or one area of the world, but all people could be involved. We made our efforts on our side, but we want also to populate and to engage regarding the endowment we have, the quality of endowment, the needs of infrastructures and the need of energy, because when you combine the effort on energy, power, and mining, you have a huge opportunity to be developed, and no one of the country in the world is led to come and to invest in DRC.
And what does strategic and effective U.S. support to developing the DRC's mining sector look like? We see it as being perhaps the biggest priority on the Africa agenda right now.
Yes, let me say, the last 2 years, we engaged several times with the US officials, but the difference with the new administration is clearly that they are focused on a clear milestone and delivery. More importantly, they want to engage also with the economic sector, the private sector, to organize a kind of public-private sector, and also to enlarge the panel of tools they're using to de-risk the DRC jurisdiction, to stop the bashing, to finance it, to be more innovative with the financing, and also to promote PPPs. And they understood for the first time, we know people start by saying the best way to have a good environment for investment is to bring peace, to bring stability, to be part of the improvement of the governance, and therefore both combined, we are quite sure that we have the right area, what environment to develop investment in the mining, in logistics, in environment, in transformation, because it's creating jobs, it stabilizes communities, it reduces the tension between the communities, and it gives an opportunity for people to have faith on the country and develop the country more peacefully. That's the best approach of US, is when they start by the peace, to improve the environment, to bring stability, to be part of engagement, the reform we should bring, and based on that, they start to de-risk the investment in the country.
And how do we work to make sure that the mining sector has positive, broader economic development benefits in the DRC?
Is why we talk about the other pillar. We consider that the mining sector should be approached holistically. What means that when you talk about a holistic approach, you cannot talk about mining just because we make extraction. We want, first of all, to get enough power to develop and to transform locally, because it creates jobs, it creates more stability, it creates value, it creates a larger basis of tax for the revenue of the government. Secondly, we need to have more power, more energy, transformation, and more importantly, also to have a transfer of skills. The last 20 years, we didn't have enough transfer of skills. The model we have today, yes, we got a lot of investment, but we didn't transform the countries. Secondly, in terms of expenses, as you said, we are one of the country who capture the most of investment in exploration, but unfortunately, most of the investment in exploration are dedicated on the brownfield. We want to review the way we can have more money to come in a greenfield exploration. The endowment of DRC today, I'm quite sure we don't know more than 40% of the potential. We need to review the way we have to approach it. We start to engage with third parties to be sure they can understand how we have to improve our governance, to improve the tax framework, to make a difference between the exploration and exploitation regime, and to be sure that we can attract more capital risk to come and develop the country. This one is one of the goals. We are promoting it. We have the support of the government to do so, and people start to come back. Brands, you heard a lot of new companies coming back in DRC or coming for the first time in DRC and being more involved, because when you see the profile of the country, we need more investors, and not only coming from one jurisdiction. We have a diversification is starting to be perceived, because energy is there, infrastructure is there, connectivity start to be there. The lack of skills are still to be replenished and to get chance to get a better return for people. We are not philanthropic. People are looking for the profit, and we accept it, but we share on the way people feel satisfied creating value in the country.
Guy Robert, the DRC is an absolute geological jackpot. What steps is Gécamines and the DRC taking to attract that foreign direct investment, which brings large-scale capital and are often the companies that can make the greenfield investments?
We agree with the government that we have to work on the tax regime. We agree with the government that we have to improve the skills. We agree with the government that we should be part to be more proactive to reduce the deficit of energy. And the base of that, we start to populate and to come with a lot of jurisdiction when they have some fears about the country to explain to them that we can mitigate, and we open doors to discuss frankly in terms of partnership, PPP, private and public sector, to develop together some project, to make a concession or to have some agreement where we can transfer the operation to third parties and to promote more investment in the country. It's happening. We saw since the last 5 years some investments are growing. Now the main goal we have is not just to growth, but to have a kind of diversification of people investing in the country, because we don't want to see people starting to accelerate the obsolescence, for example, of the cobalt. We decide to be sure that we can make a more balanced market for the cobalt, to be more proactive on the quality of the cobalt, the copper we are producing, to reopen the discussion about investment in the lithium, and to see whether even the treaties and the niobium and others rare earth could be developed, and we start to work on it very intensively. The challenge we have is to come with a new reform to make a distinction between the exploration regime in terms of tax and the exploitation regime. And therefore, people who are taking a risk with the capital can come and invest more intensively and to get more endowment discovered within the country.
I appreciate many of the things you said, particularly how we need different incentives for exploration versus production. The way also I've always been, impressed by your mining cadastre, the commitment to making sure data is public. We just need more data. We need a lot more data, but we've got to generate that data. And those are all really critical de-risking mechanisms. I have one last question for you. One of the things that we've spent a lot of time talking about is the cobalt export ban. What is the outlook for it? I think it's remarkable how this has had a material impact on prices in just a short couple of months. But what's the outlook for it?
Let me explain you where we came from. We came from, as you see a lot of graphs on the copper, the inventories of cobalt. We came from an imbalanced market. Yes, we have some slow growth of the demand, but the extensive of the supply was very, very disruptive. The way we increased the supply of the cobalt in the market was totally, let's say, I will use a word, insane. Why? Because production was over any expectation of growth of demand, and it was not tolerable for us. It means that we are digging some holes in the country where inventory becoming easy in other country. You have above 12 months of inventories out of the country and the price collapse. Is what our duty as a country to start to stabilize the price and to make more available products all around the world, because we are reaching a level where people saying knowing that is going just with 1 cent is maybe the risky to us to be dependent of one jurisdiction to get access to the product. The product was no longer considered a DRC product. Is why the ban, combined with other measures taken in the country, start to progressively decrease the excess of the inventories. Today, when we say since the first ban and the current one, we have some decrease of the inventories, but it's still high. And the price is not yet balanced. We don't have to skyrocket the price to some level unacceptable as we saw 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. But we should find a way when people who want to invest in refinery to transform the product can reach a certain level of break-even. Today, at the current price, no one can invest even in refinery in the country because the price was not sustainable. The country decide, and are really supportive of it, to start to reduce export. We don't ask to reduce the production, we start to reduce export because the excess kills the necessity to get the product. And the fact is also concentrated in 1, 2, 3, 4 companies doesn't help to get access to the product. That's our duty to rebalance the market and to get more access to everyone in the world to the product and keep people attractive for the cobalt.
Do you see the DRC shifting from a ban to a quota system?
It could make sense. We are very pragmatic on what we're looking for. The only thing we're looking for is not to distort again the market. We came from a distortion of the market, and we're not going to another distortion of the market. What we're looking for is to get some tools who make the product available for everyone. We make some decision to be sure that everyone can get access, but more importantly, we can transform and create more value. Those measure quota, ban to export, give also room to see whether we can develop locally a new network of refinery, new network of activity to transform and create value locally, and therefore create access to the product already transformed. 20 years ago where the country were producing just minerals, transfer the minerals. After that, we became a country who produce concentrate. Later, we decided to convert the country to reach a level of metal, cathode, blister, for copper. It should be the same journey for cobalt, where we can see that we're transforming the product in metal. We don't necessarily want to get to the last transformation of the product, but to create more value, more opportunity to people to develop a network of transformation locally, and to let the world have access on a balanced market.
We here know better that the effort to bring equilibrium to global metals is a very complicated challenge. And one of the great benefits that the DRC has, here in the US, we opened and closed our only cobalt mine in 2023 because of low prices. But the DRC is very blessed in the way that they have copper and cobalt together, and copper demand and copper prices are really good. So, it kind of helps offset the distortions in the cobalt market. Guy Robert, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation again.
And with that, that brings us to the end of this episode of Mapping Minerals Diplomacy. In future episodes, we'll explore how other countries are shaping their minerals diplomacy strategies and how the U.S. can better deploy its tools to compete. Thanks for watching. I'm Gracelin Baskaran. See you next time on Mapping Minerals Diplomacy.